See it in Dubai.
Explain to me what's good right now. Explain to me right now as we sit here what's good for the American public.
We want to do business in growing jurisdictions. We want to sell stuff to people where their economies are growing. That's
You just said a bunch of nothing.
Years.
Like, explain to me right now, somebody who lives in South Carolina, Nebraska, Ohio, what is good right now for the American public going into a war where you do not understand that they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz? Explain to somebody watching right now where they're from.
This war is 78 days
So you
old.
don't have an answer. Just say I
have
don't
a
have an
100% answer.
What's the
answer?
answer?
You make stuff in North Carolina, you make stuff in South Carolina, you have to sell it to somebody. You want to ship it to countries where they can afford it, where they make a lot of money, where the income per capita is very high. That's what the Middle East has.
You can't sell me a bunch of BS.
Can I tell you something?
Please like, subscribe, and share. Bakari Sellers calls out Kevin O'Leary for being completely out of touch during a heated CNN debate. After the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, many Americans have become far more skeptical of political experts sounding overly confident about foreign policy, especially when even a brief disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could drive up gas prices, hurt farmers, and worsen inflation for everyday families. Let's get into the debate.
This is still closed. And actually, today, Iran released this website that says, "Welcome to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority." They are asserting control over the strait. They're setting up an entity that would allow them to do things like collect tolls, to manage the inflows and outflows. I mean, this is a different world than we were in before, and that can have profound impacts on the global economy.
It's just social media. It's irrelevant. And the way I look at it and why this outcome probably is going to work out is the alignment in the Middle East has changed forever. There was a time only 70 days ago when the countries around Iran would not take issue with them, considering them to be in the circle of friendship, so to speak. They showed their colors by bombing all their neighbors. They weren't successful, but they caused a lot of economic damage, data centers, oil refineries. Those countries, UAE specifically, which took so much of the brunt because it's so close to the U.S., are forever aligned with the United States now, period. So whatever deal is going to happen, it's going to be with an understanding that odd man out in perpetuity is this rogue country where you've got a militia of 250,000 people. You've got to pay them to kill people, so you can't cut off their oil forever. And right now, every day they lose $210 million. So there's two ways to tenderize Iran. Shut down the strait so they can't get their oil out, squeeze their cash so they can't pay the murderers that are in there. Because remember, there's 92 million people, good people. There's a million army controlled by 250,000 paid thug murderers, militia. That's how it works. Now, you cut off that money, the thugs don't get paid. They don't kill anybody anymore. Then maybe you can get a change. But whatever happens from this point on,
be in a different place.
It's just the way it is.
Because,
That's a fact.
I think that your presentation of it sounds nice and straightforward, but the reality is that we're dealing with an ideological regime, and we're dealing with an ideological regime that's controlled by the people with the guns, and those people, despite all the economic pressure, contrary to what you are saying, have not backed down. That's why we're in this predicament, because Trump is talking to some people, but the guys with the guns keep saying no deal.
Listen, I genuinely want the United States to succeed. I don't want us to have gone through all of this hell for the last few months to end up in a worse place than where Obama had left us. And I want it to be over quickly. I consume an inordinate amount of news on a daily basis. I can't keep up with what's going on because I feel like you wake up in the morning, you read something in the newspaper, then by mid-morning, the White House spokesperson or Hegseth or Rubio have come out and said this thing is over. 2 hours later, Trump is tweeting the opposite. And then in the middle of the night, he'll wake up and he'll tweet out some sort of meme that makes absolutely no sense. In the meantime, you've got the Iranians giving him playing from the same hymnal, doing memes of Legos and tweeting things out on social media. I feel like I have heard, I don't know how many times now, in the last, 2.5, 3 months, that this war is almost over, that we are close to a deal. I hope we are close to a deal, but at this point, until I see that deal, I don't know what we're talking about.
Please like, subscribe, and share. History has shown time and time again that these conflicts are never as simple as apply pressure and the regime collapses. Iran has already survived decades of sanctions, economic pressure, and internal unrest. Governments driven by ideology often focus more on staying in power than improving economic conditions, especially when powerful military groups are involved. The Strait of Hormuz is also a huge. One day officials claim negotiations are progressing. The next day someone says the complete opposite, while social media adds even more confusion. That uncertainty matters because markets, allies, and the public all react when there's no clear strategy being communicated. After the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, many Americans are far more skeptical of confident foreign policy predictions. People remember promises of quick and necessary wars that instead lasted for years, cost trillions, and destabilized entire regions. That's why the skepticism from Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro resonated with so many viewers. It wasn't about supporting Iran or attacking America. It was about recognizing that complicated geopolitical conflicts rarely play out the way leaders predict.
The president is not sending that message to the American people. Every day he wakes up and he's like, we're almost getting a deal. And if you believe that, which I think at this point you should know better, but if you do believe that, then I think you will be surprised when it probably doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 48 hours or 72 hours or 10 days or whatever timeline he has decided to put on it.
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know when they're going to come to their senses. I mean, look, eventually the president's going to have to decide what the timeline is on his patience. I think he's showing some restraint right now and some patience with them. I mean, they have kind of violated the ceasefire. They've sent these little boats out and they've fired on our partners in the Middle East. The president has showed restraint because I think he believes in the diplomatic process that's going on. I agree with Shermichael. It may take some time.
Should he level with the American people about truly how long this could take? And if it does take a long time, how long we could be living with a global economy that's being held hostage by Iran?
I mean, the truth is he probably doesn't know, A, because, we're dealing with a fractured government, and B, we're dealing with folks here who, let's be honest, aren't the best faith operators. And so I think, look, however this ends and whenever it ends, one thing has to be true. Complete and total victory, which comes in the form of saying they will never have a nuclear weapon. Whenever he gets to that point, then it will be a success.
Does never mean a 10-year timeline.
If it's 10 years or 15 years for you, that's not complete victory?
Well, what I read today was that there would be a moratorium of maybe 15 years, and that the Iranians would also agree to send their 970 pounds of enriched uranium to the United States, and that they would promise to not pursue any weaponization. If those three things happen, that's victory.
But I would just say quickly, Abby, to your point about the rise in oil prices, you talked about this, Bakari. I mean, a part of having a 30-day ceasefire is in those negotiations, you're going to, I assume, argue for them to open up the Strait of Hormuz, because it is going to take at least 90 days. Maybe even longer to see oil prices begin to drop again. And so that has to be a part of that negotiations until you get to an ultimate
Why was that not? Can somebody explain to me like I'm a fifth grader? Why was the shutting off of the Strait of Hormuz not actually something that Pete Hegseth and the rest of them thought about prior to?
Am I supposed to know?
I'm just asking. Explain it to me, please.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is how Iran gets income.
We know that part.
So
but his
my question is, why did we not anticipate them shutting it off? Like, if you're going to war with somebody.
We didn't. I have no idea. The strategy was to go in there and change the dynamics in perpetuity. No question. After
we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
I guarantee you two things. Before this is worked out, the strait will be open and probably policed by people around that region because it's in their best interest. And secondly, there are no friends in the world left for Iran. Maybe you could call China in. China. Maybe you could call Russia. But these are rogue nations. And what Trump has done, whether you like it or you don't, he's changed the axis of power there. Because at the end of the day, this is good for that region. That region has such potential and growth, and you could see it in Dubai.
Explain to me what's good right now. Explain to me right now as we sit here what's good for the American public.
We want to do business in growing jurisdictions. We want to sell stuff to people where their economies are growing. That's
you just said a bunch of nothing.
Years.
Like, explain to me right now, somebody who lives in South Carolina, Nebraska, Ohio, what is good right now for the American public going into a war where you do not understand that they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz? Explain to somebody watching right now where they're from.
This war is 78 days
So you don't have an answer. Just say
I have a 100% answer.
What's the answer?
You make stuff in North Carolina, you make stuff in South Carolina, you have to sell it to somebody. You want to ship it to countries where they can afford it. where they make a lot of money, where the income per capita is very high. That's what the Middle East has.
You can't sell me a bunch of BS.
Can I tell you something?
Still BS here.
Just a second, just a
Kevin,
second.
the farmer in North Carolina who was not able to secure fertilizer for their planting crops right now is not going to have a short-term answer.
They won't have to
It's not
solve
going
that
be able
problem in
to solve-
24 hours? You just take the tariff off potash.
You raised a good topic, which is short-term versus long-term. And I grant you, there will be people who look at this as a short-term, painful experience. What the president has said, though, is, look, I just cannot permit, after all these years, after 47 years of these people being at war with us and Western civilization, I cannot permit them to get to a place where they have a nuclear weapon. And over the long term, our children and our grandchildren will thank us when we take that away from them. So it is a good debating topic, short versus long term. The president here has a long-term thought, which is he can't let these people
Scott, there's such a huge number of farmers declaring bankruptcy right now. And if I were a farmer in America, I'd be asking myself, why the hell did we send $40 billion to bail out Argentina and nobody's helping us out?
That was a credit swap and we made money on it.
Sure, Michael, you were
Look, I was just going to say
Explain
quickly,
that to the farmers.
Bakari is raising a very legitimate question about the immediate versus the long term. I mean, in terms of immediate, I don't have an answer that will be satisfactory to most people who are struggling out there. To me, in the long run, I'm looking at stabilization in the region. I'm also looking at China, which has been a big focal point for me. They get 14% of their oil reserves from Iran. They are our number one adversary globally. I think any opportunity the United States can diminish that is critically important for our hegemony over the next 50 to 100 years. That's a long-term answer, but a very valid one.
All right. Well, the thing I'm looking for is, can they actually get a deal? Because at the end of the day, Iran's big play has been for many decades just to keep talking. And they'd love to just keep talking until the cows come home. But will they actually sign on the dotted line is the big question for this White House.
Please like, subscribe, and share. Bakery sellers raised one of the most practical questions in the entire debate. What does any of this actually mean for everyday Americans struggling with inflation, debt, and economic uncertainty right now? Politicians and TV commentators often focus on long-term strategy in the Middle East, but most people are focused on paying bills and surviving week to week. The Strait of Hormuz is also far from a small issue. Nearly 20% of global oil shipments pass through that narrow waterway, and even the threat of disruption can immediately drive up oil prices. That leads to higher gas prices, more expensive shipping, rising fertilizer costs, and increased food prices. Farmers in places like North Carolina and across the Midwest are especially vulnerable because agriculture Another depends
major
heavily
point was
on
how
little
little
attention
fertilizer
seemed to be given
and
to
transportation
the possible
costs
economic
staying
fallout
stable.
ahead of time. History has repeatedly shown that conflicts in the Middle East affect global energy markets. From the 1970s oil crisis to the Gulf War and Iraq, instability in the Persian Gulf has consistently created economic ripple effects worldwide. After Iraq and Afghanistan, many Americans are far more skeptical of promises about foreign interventions.